The appeal of a virtual world is obvious. Unconstrained by anything but our imagination, we can create worlds without limit. That's what Lauren and Andy are doing. They're building Zenith, a virtual universe that they hope will be a social and entertainment hub for millions of people.
When you look at a lot of what's going on in the world right now, it's driven by fear and it's driven by isolation.
They have a vision for a new type of community that unlocks the potential of VR while addressing the challenges plaguing many online communities.
You can have experiences that you just physically cannot have in the real world.
These virtual worlds can be empathy machines.
We think that we can help people to be their best and most authentic selves, and that will spill out into the real world. I mean, in a sense, what we are doing is beta testing a universe.
I'm sure you guys have seen or heard of Ready Player One. What Spielberg was selling was the vision of living in a virtual world, not just watching it. And so that's what we're building. We're building a virtual world that people can live in, just like Ready Player One.
Andy and Lauren are the co-founders of Ramen VR, a small studio coming out of Y Combinator and backed by Oculus. They're trying to create Zenith, an entire universe set in virtual reality.
We view Zenith as not just a game. We see this as a bonding experience. It could be that third space where people gather together and have meaningful social experiences.
A third space, for some people, is a cafe or a bar, or even a bookstore, where they can socialize and connect with others outside of work or home.
I think people don't give games a lot of credit. You can learn a lot from games about problem solving, about cooperation and working with other people. When it comes to Zenith, we've designed it with this bigger picture in mind, which is to build a world that people can live in and spend a lot of time in.
You can do anything and be anyone. We're just building a world that's as real and visceral as the one we're sitting in right now. So how can we create a world that is a positive influence on society when it is just yet another virtual world that people can get lost in?
There isn't really a blueprint for how to design a world, how to design a culture, how to design a society. The first step to doing that, I think, is just to make a game that's fun.
The gameplay modes do have an impact on what kind of culture is built. Our first iteration is going to be focused on PvE content, which is player versus environment. So you and other players are collaborating together to kill monsters that are driven by artificial intelligence. We think the community building and that early seed of players we bring in is just as important as the game that we're building itself. So part of the reason why we're working on this is to make sure that VR is a more social experience rather than an isolating one.
If recent history has taught us anything, it's that our virtual personas sometimes inhabit pretty terrible virtual worlds. These are all online phenomena that can and do have negative impacts on the real world. To be honest, it's not entirely clear that Lauren and Andy have all the answers, and I think they would be the first to admit that. And they're working really hard to learn from those mistakes. They're building the universe that they want to inhabit.
Some people feel like they can never be their whole selves ever in front of anyone else. Anonymity is definitely a double-edged sword because people can do great things and they can do terrible things if you don't know who they are. So I think one thing that might be interesting is the concept of pseudonymity. First thing, we wanted to make sure that people's avatars could reflect how they wanted to look. Everything from the height, to the face, to the skin tone, to the hair. And we also wanted the voice to reflect how people wanted to sound. It happens a lot where women who are in online games, as soon as you say something into the mic, there's a flood of harassment that comes in. So we want people to have the option to change their voice, and not just out of fear of harassment, but just because that's a part of who you are too.
I guess everything can be used for good and for bad, right? I think it's more about, does that engagement lead to a positive outcome or a negative outcome? So for us, it's about building the positive feedback loops that cause people to be friendlier and better to each other and to really realize the potential in themselves.
I think it's fair to say that right now no one knows how to do this. This is a new thing that people are still figuring out. And it's nice to know that people like Andy and Lauren are putting the right kind of energy and intention into answering these questions.
The game isn't in anyone's hands right now. But honestly, one of the things that I'm proudest of that we've done so far is build a community. We have a community of about 6,000 people right now on Discord. And that community is very strong, it's very passionate. This is when you see, does this float when you stick it all together, or does it sink?
One thing is clear. More people will be doing this. And that means more people will need to ask a serious question. What kind of universe do I want to create?
With Zenith, gameplay becomes the shared experience that people bond over. I think if this succeeds, it'll have a transformative effect on how our society works and functions in the long term.
Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. Please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram so that we can continue to share stories about people thinking differently and changing the world.